on the record now.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and set forth our appearances. We'll start first with the plaintiff, then we'll move to the defense.
Good morning, Your Honor. Teddy Parker on behalf of the plaintiff.
Morning, Your Honor. Robert Eglett on behalf of plaintiff.
Good morning, Brandon Switzer on behalf of plaintiff.
Good morning, Your Honor. Eric Pepperman for plaintiffs, and Bill Kemp should be here any minute.
All right.
Brad Johnson, Tyler Watson, Mike Esposito, Eric Freeman on behalf of the defense, Your Honor.
All right. Once again, good morning. And I guess the one remaining issue we have to deal with would be the deposition videos. And there's been some objections lodged and regarding certain contents of the depositions. And I'd like to go through that as efficiently as possible. I do have a copy of the real water designations, and it appears that certain ones have plaintiff objections and the real water responses. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. I think for efficiency purposes, it might make sense to go through the two witnesses that plaintiffs intend to play in their case in chief first. That would be David Goldsmith and Anthony Randolph that have objections. With respect to David Goldsmith.
And which, okay, let me see here. Okay, David Goldsmith, I see where you're at. Yes, sir.
So we have a cut of Mr. Goldsmith that we've already played at the last trial. That same cut was agreed to. In addition to that cut, Real Water has made a handful of other designations that plaintiffs object to. The first one on the chart in front of you, Your Honor, is 1911 through 12 and 1914 through 16. We can waive that objection, but the rest of the objections we just can't agree on because they reference the closure of the company, the product being off the market, and they otherwise violate motions in limine or the summary judgment order establishing causation. So those additional designations plaintiffs would object to for those reasons.
And we're talking about, for example, page 51, lines 11 through 25, so on, as set forth in the chart?
Yes, Your Honor. Behind the chart, we have the specific pages and designations that are at issue.
Okay, I got you. Okay, let's hear from the adverse.
Your Honor, as I promised, I'm trying to keep this short and sweet. The comment, first of all, counsel, we are good with the page 19 designations. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Just making sure we have that. So as far as the line designations on 51, Your Honor, it doesn't actually say that the company's closed. It just says the product was taken off the market, which I think is a very reasonable assertion to make when causation's already been established. It does not speak to the condition of the company in any way, shape, or form, so I would say that that particular argument is irrelevant. As we put forth in the responses to the rest, a lot of this is impeachment evidence. Some of it goes to the issue of whether or not to award punitive damages. And other than the reference on page 51, candidly, I am not seeing what would be in violation of any of this court's orders. So I don't think that any of the testimony is problematic. I think it's relevant to the case. And as far as the one comment on 51, as I said, I highly doubt any juror sitting here today thinks that there are people still selling real water with hydrazine in it.
All right, Mr. Pepperman.
I mean, Your Honor, we have a clear motion to eliminate ruling prohibiting this exact thing. There's no need for it. They haven't cited anything why it's relevant other than to inject into the jury that Real Water is taken off the market and the company's closed. So it's irrelevant and unduly prejudicial. On the designations on 53, I mean, he's talking about there being no cases before August 2020. We have summary judgment on cases prior to 2018. It's a violation of motion eliminate 19, which precludes the lack of legal history. So they say it's relevant to punitive damages. There's no articulation on how. The testimony on dosage, this witness did not, he doesn't have a foundation about dosage. He says he doesn't know anything about the dosing. We had a separate expert on that, Dr. Kosnet, who's the medical toxicologist who testified on these matters. I mean, none of this is relevant. It's just only potential prejudice.
And if I may respond, Your Honor, I'm trying not to interrupt opposing counsel. So, Your Honor, just a few key points. First and foremost, the fact that somebody else may be testifying as this information doesn't necessarily render this information irrelevant. This is an expert in the case. As far as motion eliminating 19 as to prior legal action, I don't know, and I'm trying to pull it up, but my recollection was that it does not prohibit an expert from testifying about what information about case clusters he considered as part of his analysis. We're not saying there was no prior, there were no prior litigation, there were no prior claims. We're just saying, I think what he's just saying is, because we look at the call to question, he's discussing, if you start back on 51, what you looked at, what your analysis was limited to the probable and suspect cases identified by the public health agencies. So it's a narrow line of questioning, and it doesn't, it doesn't speak at all to the prior case issue. Like I said, I'm pulling that up right now just to see if I can cite the language.
I have the language from the order if it's helpful.
1 second, counsel. Yeah, testimony arguments as to purported lack of injury or lawsuits related to rural water prior to August 1st, 2020, and testimony arguments regarding a purported lack of injury or lawsuits related to rural water outside of Clark County is precluded. So to the extent that we're saying that there were claims for injury or associated lawsuits, that's not what this is saying, Your Honor. This is strictly saying this is what Dr. Goldsmith analyzed when he was coming to his conclusions. It's a fairly nondescript thing to ask an expert.
And ultimately, what are his conclusions?
Well, Your Honor, we're taking this a little out of context because we don't have the entirety of the deposition designation. But he says, I've not seen any evidence that there continue to be cases of acute liver failure arising specifically in the Las Vegas area after the product was taken off the market. And then he says, question. So your analysis and your review, this is on page 53, of all the information that you received, were you able to identify any outbreak or cluster of cases associated with the consumption of rural water prior to August of 2020? No, I wasn't. And then he gets into page 68 where, and again, these are separate objections, Your Honor, so they don't all go into the same context. But this is where he's talking about an individual claiming that he or she consumed a bottle of real water here or there and then stopped for a number of months and later developed liver injuries many months later. That would not be
Here's
consistent.
my question. For what purposes is his testimony being offered in this case in light of the summary judgment motions I've granted? I just want to make sure I understand what's going on here.
Well, Your Honor, Dr. Goldsmith is an epidemiologist who was initially retained by Real Water.
I understand.
We've agreed on his testimony that's going to be played, or the lion's share of it. There's just a couple where he talks about his epidemiological analysis and findings. There's just a couple, these few designations that we cannot agree on. And if we take them one by one, page 51, the designation, that very clearly references the product being taken off the market. There's a very clear ruling from Your Honor that says that is not admissible. It's irrelevant and unduly prejudicial. So this testimony designation, 5111 through 25, should be out. No question about it. Because it violates the court's motion to eliminate order. Then 53, he's talking about 53, and here
Cases prior to 2020 when there was cases prior to 2020.
Yes, because what Dr. Goldsmith looked at was the government epidemiological investigation, which the government did not investigate any cases prior to September of 2020, which was Chris Wren. He was one of the 5 babies' fathers. That's when he got sick. So based on the Southern Nevada Health District interviewing the 5 families of the 5 babies, they said, okay, this is the earliest person of this cluster that we know of that got sick. So they set an artificial deadline for their investigation. So there were no pre-2020 cases referenced. If Your Honor remembers, this was a hot button issue in the prior cases because the defendants wanted to argue to say, look, because the Southern Nevada Health District didn't investigate pre-2020 cases, there must be no pre-2020 cases. And so that's what this line of questioning is on. And that's why we made the motion to eliminate, to say you can't argue lack of legal history because that's irrelevant. The fact that the Southern Nevada Health District didn't look for cases beforehand doesn't mean that there weren't cases beforehand. And that's Your Honor's summary judgment motion.
No, I understand. I do.
2018 cases. So this testimony about there being no pre-2020 cases, this little bit is just irrelevant and unduly prejudicial because it's confusing and misleading.
Well, it's actually inaccurate.
And inaccurate, Your Honor, yes, true. And then page 68, this is just, in 69, this is just several pages where they're asking him about hydrazine toxicity and dose, and he's saying, I'm not the expert on that. I don't know the dose limits. And he's not being offered for that. So it's also irrelevant and confusing, and there's just no justification for playing this part of the testimony.
Well, I'm looking here, like, for example, on page 69, question, yeah, are you aware of the specific dose that would be toxic in humans ever being determined scientifically? No, I am not. Okay. And this is a really important issue, I think, that gets overlooked in this case, and I really feel strongly about this. When it comes to human testing, if it's a known toxin, like hydrazine, there's not going to be any human testing on that.
That's right.
I mean, there just isn't. You know, I mean, not in the United States. Now, other countries might have done that, but not here.
It'd be unethical, Your Honor.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, because you don't test people with known toxins. Like, you might want to determine if there's a toxicity level for vitamin C. That's a different issue.
That's right.
All right. So, So I've looked at pages 51, 53. I just want to make sure I'm clear. 68, and that dealt with specifically with the toxicity levels, right? So I'm going to exclude, make it quick, 51, 53, and 68, 69. Okay.
68 and 69?
Yes.
So, Your Honor, just for the record, page 19 is in by stipulation, and 72, 73 are in by the court's decision.
I haven't made it. I haven't gotten there yet.
Oh.
Have I gotten there yet?
Not yet, Your Honor.
When you stopped, Your Honor, I thought you said those are the ones you were excluding.
No, I'm just continuing on because we got to talk about them. I just want to make sure I'm clear. Let's talk about 72, 73 real quick.
Your Honor, this testimony is, number one, they're basically representing what another witness who has not testified said in her deposition. And then they're talking about violations of the federal regulations, which were excluded because hydrazine is not specifically listed as a contaminant that cannot be in water, and asking him to speculate on whether hydrazine is commonly tested as part of bottled water. And he specifically asked on 73, do you have any knowledge one way or another whether hydrazine is a compound that is commonly tested in municipal water? I am not, a really strong expert on this. He's not offered on this. He doesn't know about it. They're just trying to get him to play speculation, where they're basically reading in other testimony that is not been played or accurate, and it's, again, irrelevant and unfairly prejudicial and violative of motions to eliminate orders.
Sir, anything you want to add?
Your Honor, this is going to go directly to the testimony that their expert HUD is going to provide on what is the appropriate testing and what are the industry standards as far as determining which contaminants are in the water. I think that Dr. Goldsmith, before he says, well, I'm not, the expert on this, or I'm paraphrasing his language, my apologies, where he says, I am not a really strong expert on this, is discussing the nature of the municipal water that's used, like it was used in this case. The facts are relevant, and we would respect the court's decision either way, but this absolutely goes to other testimony that's going to be presented in this case.
But I mean, my question is this. Question, and this is at line 15, page 73. Do you have any knowledge one way or another whether hydrazine is a compound that is commonly tested in municipal water? Now, here's my point. What does municipal water have to do with this, first of all? Secondly, it doesn't appear to me he's the guy to be asking that question as far as what type of testing occurs with municipal water, like City of Las Vegas or the county or whatever.
I hope I'm not mistaken, Your Honor, but real water was derived, the source water is municipal water.
But absolutely, but we're not talking about the testing of municipal water. We're talking about testing of real water subsequent to utilizing municipal water. That's what the issue is.
Your Honor, to the extent that we need to, well, first of all, where to start on this? Part of the analysis when it comes to whether or not there was a conscious disregard for the safety of the clients is any consideration that real water may have provided or any knowledge that they may have as to the purity of the source water. That's actually testimony that came out in other cases, is the idea that, a municipal water is tested. It's usually fairly pure, and there are some contaminants in it. So to the extent that it isn't about the testing of real water, I think that's a separate issue.
But that is the issue. The issue is not the testing of municipal water.
It's not a disjunctive analysis, Your Honor. Both.
But it is.
Issue
I mean,
in this
really,
case.
no, it's not an issue. There's been no evidence submitted that there was a problem with Clark County water.
That's not the point, Your Honor.
It is the point.
No, that's not the point this testimony is trying to make. Let me be clear.
But that's why it's not relevant. Testing of what does testing municipal water have to do with this case?
Because it shows the understanding of what the real water defendants knew about the source of the water that was coming in. Industry standards in this case, part of that HACCP analysis.
There's been no allegation in this case that there was a problem with the municipal water.
No, but there is an allegation in this case that the real water defendants consciously disregarded HACCP standards, Your Honor.
Well, that's
Part
a
of that
different.
is
Well,
evaluating
that's a
source
total.
water.
But HACCP standard doesn't have anything to do with municipal water.
It does, Your Honor.
How?
Because knowing the quality of the source water, having an understanding of what's in the source water is part of that industry standard. It's part of that analysis.
There's been no issue raised in this case regarding source water, is there?
No, you're not.
There has been an issue with regards to compliance with HACCP standards, Your Honor.
But
That
that
has to be
hasn't-
taken in the totality.
Okay, well, I look at it differently. It's irrelevant. It really is, as far as municipal water is concerned in this case. So that's out. Let's go to the next one.
That's all that we have on Dr. Goldsmith. Then the next witness is Anthony Randolph. So, Your Honor, I think, so again, we have a cut of Mr. Randolph's trial testimony that we played in the last trial that's agreed to, no dispute over any of that. In addition to that trial testimony that we're going to play, Real Water has made 3 additional designations from his deposition. I want to focus on the second 2 because those are the problematic ones, and then the first one I think is just irrelevant, and there's no need to play any portion of his deposition after his agreed upon trial testimony. So looking at page 105, 6 through 107, 9, they're asking him about, Mr. Randolph's asked about customer complaints that have been admitted into exhibits, and he says he hasn't seen any of those customer complaints, he didn't have any knowledge of them, and then he starts volunteering information that are non-responsive to the question about, oh, there's only a few complaints, so that's a good thing. This testimony is completely irrelevant because Mr. Randolph says he doesn't have any knowledge about the complaints, so he has no foundation to offer any of this. He doesn't know about the universe of complaints. He doesn't see all the complaints. He's the vice president of sales. His experience with complaints would be limited to if one of his customers brings it up to him, and his, volunteering of this information is just simply irrelevant and inaccurate and prejudicial.
Your Honor, first and foremost, this is page 93 with the NSF audits. This is a nondescript testimony of familiarity with NSF. Again, the NSF audits are going to be a key component of their own experts' testimony. This is something that has been raised in this case, and it's material. And candidly, if we're talking about whether or not Mr. Randolph had familiarity with the Costco NSF audit process, that's fair game. So as far as 93 goes, opposing counsel hasn't stated what it could possibly be duplicative of with any specificity. I don't think there's a problem with the testimony, and it's 5 lines. So as a practical matter, it's not going to have any dramatic impact on the jury. As far as pages 105 through 107 go, Your Honor, as far as the representation that he doesn't know, on page 105, did you have any involvement with customer complaints? Answer, sometimes. And then he goes on to discuss what his involvement with customer complaints are. The purpose of his testimony is to talk about, in part, how he handled customer complaints or how the company did. This is incredibly relevant, Your Honor. I fundamentally don't understand how we can look at this any other way. Now, on page 106, I think what counsel is probably referring to is, let's see, as to a specific complaint, page 11. Do you remember this complaint? Witness, I can't say remember the specific complaint, no. And then Mr. Kemp, plaintiff's own attorney, switched to a separate question and said, okay, if some customer did complain and it came to your attention that they were complaining about a gasoline-like substance, would that be a matter for concern? And that's something that was raised in opening. That's something that has been discussed in this case. The gasoline smell is an issue because that is, according to the plaintiffs, a key indicator that hydrazine was in the water. And the way that Mr. Kemp tailored up this question is to present a hypothetical. It has nothing to do with the specific complaints or Mr. Randolph's knowledge of them. So I don't think it's an accurate representation to say that all of this is irrelevant because Mr. Randolph doesn't know certain complaints. And candidly, I think it's a waived issue anyways because the exact same thing came up in Desitel, and the court allowed Desitel testimony to come in that discussed complaints that Desitel specifically said he'd never heard of or he'd never seen. So even if the argument was accurate, it's contradicted by what's already happened in this case. But the argument is not accurate. The testimony presented is not as to specific complaints. And then if we go to 109, 110, again, these are questions grounded in hypotheticals. If you had become aware of these, what, if anything, would you have done? That was the question. So again, we're talking about his best practices, company best practices. We're talking about what would have happened in the event that certain complaints were brought to Real Water's attention or to his attention personally. This is all significantly material to the case. And it's completely unrelated to whether or not Mr. Randolph has any specific knowledge of any complaint, including the one complaint that's actually referenced in this testimony.
All right.
Your Honor, on page 105, he's asked, what kind of involvement would you have? And he says, gives, some testimony and then says, in volunteers, we didn't have a ton of complaints besides delivery. Your Honor, that's inaccurate. It's not true. He says he doesn't have any involvement with customer complaints or only sometimes. And then he's saying we don't have a ton of them. We have a ton of them. And the production that we have is incomplete. There are gaps in the complaints. It's amazing how many we have given the incomplete production. He has no foundation to say we didn't have a ton of complaints, and it's inaccurate. It's contrary to the evidence. Why should they be able to play testimony that he's saying at the outset he doesn't have foundation to give, and then is volunteering inaccurate information that they want to take and say, look, Anthony Randolph said we didn't have a ton of complaints.
That sure sounds like closing argument, Your Honor. And candidly, the foundation is there.
One at a time. This is what I'm going to do. I just want to go through this because we have to get involved. We have to make decisions. As far as page 105 is concerned, I'm going to permit questions starting at line 6 and his response through line 8. Line 9 through 18 will be out. Then it appears to me that from that point on, he's asking him questions. Well, we might have to get this other part. After taking out that, what's the problem from line 19 on?
I mean, 19 through 25 is fine, but then on 106.3 says, prior to today, did you know that there was a complaint in 2014 about a gasoline-like substance in a bottle? Answer,
Okay.
We may get complaints every now and then, but again, we didn't get many complaints. Follow-up question, so is that a yes answer to my question or a no answer? What's the question? Do you remember this complaint? I can't say I remember the specific complaint.
Okay, so that's out.
So that would be 20, that's 106, 1 through 15, Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay, so based on the fact that they didn't have a plan, they didn't have a problem, I marked 19 through 25 of page 105 as in.
We'll get that right now.
That was the prior page, Your Honor. that
Okay,
Peppermint said
yeah,
was fine.
absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. And then we go on page 106,
So that's 106.
line 17.
Correct, Your Honor.
So I think 14 through 15 answers the question on 106, 14 through 15 answers the question on 105, 25.
That's why I ruled the way I did. Let's continue on.
So we're at line
Now,
17.
we're at line 16 then. Yes,
Yes. Oh, excuse me, 16. Correct.
yes. Hypothetical. What's wrong with 106, line 16 through 107, line 9?
So this, he's just purely speculating. He says, I didn't see the complaint. He doesn't know anything about the complaint or the investigation, and he's just saying, yeah, it looks like he did this, and it looks like he did that.
Your Honor, he's analyzing what Real Water would do in the event that this was brought to his attention. This is specifically a punitive damages issue because it's talking about what their standard operating procedures would be, what their HACCP protections in place were. So to the extent that plaintiffs invited this question to ask what Real Water would have done, I doubt they would have a problem if Mr. Randolph's testimony was less favorable. But the fact is, this is him talking about what he would have done if he had knowledge of this complaint, and that's relevant to how Real Water performed.
Your Honor, he's not the quality assurance person. He's not investigating complaints. He's not aware of this specific complaint or investigation, and he's just,
I'm trying to I'll be candid with everyone. I'm trying to understand his response. That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, that's the problem, Judge.
Yeah.
He's not the, as Mr. Peppermint said, he's admitted he wasn't the quality assurance manager. No one ever told him that. And he's just speculating here about what the company would have done, and he doesn't know because he wasn't in that position, Judge.
And that's
There was no one in a position except a receptionist.
And that's the closing, Your Honor. And frankly, what
it's not
counsel
the
just
closing.
stated, excuse
Well, one
me,
at a-
counsel.
one
I'm
at a
not
time.
finished. There's no foundation for it.
One at a time.
Page 105, 6 through 8, he specifically says, we're talking about foundation now, that he had involvement in customer complaints sometimes. Then plaintiff's counsel asks, what kind of involvement? He talks about speaking to the customers. He talks about meeting with the department heads. There's absolutely foundation to show that he had personal knowledge as to what Real Water did when they were put on notice of complaints.
And that's been excluded by the court, what he just read already, Your Honor. That's
6
been
through 8 has been admitted, counsel.
106.
106,
Lines 6 through 8
it's out.
on page 105.
Oh, 105. You said 106.
Anyway, I'm trying to look at his response to see if it makes sense.
I mean, his response are directly, it looks like this happened, it seems like this happened.
Yeah, if we did get any complaints, we would try to trace it back as quick as possible.
There's been no foundation laid that this witness knows what policies and procedures, if any, that Real Water had. And as Mr. Desital has already testified, they had no standard operating procedures with respect to anything, but in particular, quality assurance.
All right.
Your Honor, 105 specifically lays the foundation. I mean, he had, I mean, to the extent that we're not letting the jury see that he talked to department heads, that's one thing. But we are letting the jury know that he was involved in the customer complaint process. Titles, that's closing argument. Whether or not Desital has more...
As far as 107, 106, starting at line 16 through 107, line 9, that'll be out. Let's move on to 109.
Your Honor, this one is similar to your prior ruling where he is just saying, oh, look, only 3 complaints out of millions of customers. I mean, there's barely any complaints. And then he's talking about what was done in a particular investigation that he has no foundation for and is not accurate.
All right.
Your Honor, once again, I dispute the idea that there's no foundation. We're literally letting testimony in that says that he was involved in the complaints and on behalf of Real Water.
Your Honor, I mean, I'd be fine with 110, 11 through 20, but
The merits of 111 through 120 are no different than the prior testimony. I mean, he's talking about specifically what...
Well, I mean, this is we're going to bottom line it. Number one, they had no quality assurance program. The only thing I permitted was something that was directly related to his involvement. That's it. Anything else is speculation because they had no program in place.
Your Honor, the NSF audits say differently.
Tell me, what was the quality assurance program in place?
Your Honor, what I'm telling you is
Where's
that
the manual? There is none.
the
I
NSF
don't care about
audits that were conducted.
what was the quality assurance program in place at Real Water.
Where's any standard operating procedures from Real Water?
In the exhibits, counsel.
No.
No, that's not. They didn't have one. They had it, and she was a very nice lady. Is that what's her name again?
Patricia Converse.
Yes.
And Miss Converse, very nice lady, and she was very candid. They had no process in place.
Is the court making a finding right now that there was no quality assurance program in place?
I'm not, the evidence doesn't support one was in place. What evidence can you point to where they had a quality assurance program in place?
I can point to NSF audits
I don't
conducted by
I
a
don't care about
certified third
NSF.
party.
I'm not talking about NSF audits. What evidence do you have that they had that in place?
Is that not evidence, Your Honor?
No, it's not evidence.
Those exhibits.
What evidence do you?
Okay.
What evidence has your client produced in this case that they had a quality assurance program in place?
Well, Your Honor, at this point, those exhibits aren't admitted yet.
But I mean, no, I'm not, and the reason why I'm asking the question, let's keep it for real. Really, they had nothing in place.
Your Honor,
I respectfully
Written
disagree.
standard operating procedures.
They had no quality,
written quality
this is my
assurance
third trial in this
This
case.
is just no foundation for this. It's pure speculation.
Your Honor, this is, and I recognize this is Mr. Esposito's first time in terms of this case. Perhaps he's not as familiar as we are. There's not been a single Real Water employee who's testified that they actually practiced some form of SOP when it comes to quality control. If you could point to one person who's testified in 4 trials who actually said they followed a process, we would be surprised, and I think we would all perhaps reconsider your position. But given that we know the testimony, we know the depositions, we know that there was no SOP followed. In fact, the only thing that was done is the giving of free water.
That was
in
their
response
quality
to
assurance
complaints.
They certainly
That's it.
had nothing in writing.
We've had testimony in this case already referencing SOPs. I think that even came in through Patty Converse. We have documents in this case.
Go ahead, man.
I appreciate it.
No worries.
Mr. Prater. Thank you.
Go ahead.
We have an expert coming up, and I can tell you because I have read prior transcripts for prior cases where third-party audits that look at the HACCP standards, which is exactly how the plaintiffs plan on proving up that punitive damages should be awarded in this case, involve quality assurance programs. Now, I understand the court is disinclined to hear argument relating to compliance with federal regulations, but guess what? Catherine Hutt's testimony...
Well, I can tell you why. This is a strict products liability case. Conduct has no relevance whatsoever. The sole thrust and focus in a restatement of Torch 402A analysis is whether the product was defective and dangerous. That's it.
That's been decided, Your Honor.
Yeah, well, no, that's the law.
But-
You don't look at the fact that there might be compliance of this or that. That's not a defense in a strict products liability case. It's not.
And so, Your Honor, just to make sure I'm clear on the court's point, the party's conduct, their knowledge as to certain complaints, their attempts to follow, Blaine Jones getting certified as a HACCP qualified individual.
None of that
are-
matters.
As far as.
That's
whether
why
or
I
not to
granted
award-
some, wait, none of that matters. I would suggest you take a closer look at strict products liability, because the sole thrust and focus is on the defective condition of the product, nothing more, nothing less. It's not a defense that we tried. The issue is whether it's a defective product, unreasonably dangerous. Nevada follows the consumer expectation test. This is straightforward and simple. I don't know why we're replowing this. Because you're talking about conduct. Conduct is never relevant in a strict products liability case.
It is
never.
punitive damages.
Yeah, well, no, we're not talking about punitive damages, and don't flip it on me. I understand punitive damages too. My point is this: in a strict products liability case, it doesn't come in. Just as important too, if you're trying to say, Judge, they had some sort of a program in place regarding quality assurance, they didn't. No clients, no party from Real Waters testified to that. No witnesses testified to that. They didn't have anything in place. They named the receptionist as the QA person.
We'll respect the court's decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's and I don't want to, but as far as 109 and 10 out,
That's
let's
all,
move
Your
on.
Honor, thank you.
And we're on 93, that's out. I think the next page is 105, 106. Let's talk about that real quick.
We already did, Your Honor.
Oh, we did. Let me see here.
So just to make sure the record's clear, Counselor Pepperman, if you want to follow along. As to pages 105, 106, I have lines 6 through 8 in, 9 through 18 out, 19 through 25 in.
We're on, I think I've moved on to Wren. Is this Wren? Which one? I'm on, I don't even know.
Oh, no, Your Honor, you were citing the page numbers for the Randolph designation, so I just want to make sure the
Okay.
record is clear. But I believe Counselor Pepperman.
Are they in here
wanted
twice,
something.
Randolph?
No.
Yeah, I think there, for some reason, there was additional pages that are just copies attached
Okay.
after.
All
So,
right.
yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Oh, I see what you're, okay. Yeah, I see it.
So 93, 15 through 22 is out. 115, 6 through 8 in. 9 through 18 out. 19 through 25 and 106, 14 through 15 in. The rest of the designations out.
Out. Okay, let's move on to another.
I think that we should, we can end there. That'll take us to a plaintiff's case in chief.
Okay, we have others too. When are we going to do, and these are all designations from the defense perspective?
Yes, Your Honor.
And I want to make sure I'm clear on that, because I don't want to overlook this when it comes to a defense case in chief. When should we do that? It's 11 o'clock now.
Your Honor, I think we can find some time to do that so where the jury's not waiting, so we don't keep them waiting any longer, but maybe Friday.
Friday, which ones do I have to do so I can look at them in this book?
Casey Akins, Amy Jones, and Brent Jones.
Okay.
That's fine with us, Your Honor.
All right, that's what we'll do.
Your Honor, we have one other thing outside the president. I don't think this should take very long. This is with respect, I brought this up to the court before trial even started. I think the first day of jury selection, that we had subpoenaed Quest Diagnostic. When we requested their records, they left out a record. I found this out a few weeks before trial from Ms. King, who says, no, that you're missing a record here. And she was able to go on their portal, which she had access to, and get the record for us. And so we have the record here. We subpoenaed this particular record, and in fact, everything from Quest's portal to be produced here in court on, it was a court-ordered subpoena to produce here in court on the first Monday of jury selection. To this date, Quest has still not responded to our subpoena. In light of the fact that I don't think there's any issue that this is not a legitimate medical record on a blood test for Lisa King, I would request that this exhibit be admitted at this time. It's necessary for Dr. Hudson's testimony, Your Honor.
I'm just looking for the date. What is the date of this lab work?
The date is, it was done 12 days after her first point, so.
Oh, so this is all from 2019?
2019, yes.
Yeah, no objection.
All right, that makes it easy.
What exhibit number do you want it to be marked as?
Next in order,
So that would be 1207?
1207.
Don't do it. Don't give it 1207. We're gonna have to give it the next one after this conversation. So
Right.
it'll be, hold on, let me tell you. It'll be 1209.
1209?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you, Tori.
So where are we at now?
So, Your Honor, our plan is to take Dr. Hudson next, and I have all of the documents I intend to use have been admitted by virtue of the court's orders or by stipulation, except for, I think, a couple of board name documents that were part of her original Exhibit 153, but I've taken them because I don't want to go through, of course, all of her documents and just excerpts of those. I brought them with me. I brought copies for Tori, of course, and for Mr. Johnson and his team. And I know they've seen the documents. These documents have been date stamped and in the case a long time ago, and they're nothing new to it. It's just that I'm separating it for purposes of the presentation with Dr. Hudson. So it would be board name. The exhibit would be 1207. I'm giving a copy to Mr. Johnson. Your Honor, if I could approach Tori.
You may.
Thank you.
Which one is that going to be?
This is
That's
1207.
1207. And then I also have 1208, which is Abraham's, a one page, I believe, of Abraham's Alvera's medical records. It's an ultrasound. Again, these documents have been reduced a long time ago. They're part of his original exhibit. I just took a single page out of it. If I could approach one more time.
You may, Mr. Parker.
Thank you. That'll be 1208. And this is the one you're speaking of?
Along with that, we have a stipulation for Nigel records, Nigel Davis Richard records that will be presented during Hudson as well as Mr. Davis's direct examination, and that's stipulated new 246.
What do we do with that?
Which has been stipulated by the parties so we can move for admission.
Okay. Is that true? So stipulated, counsel?
Tyler?
And what number will it
Those
be?
are ours.
Oh, sorry.
Nigel David Richard,
Oh.
stipulated?
Yes, we have stipulated those. Thank you.
You have the
Is this all
number?
one big pack?
Yeah.
Give it to them? Okay. We don't have one to Tori?
For clarification,
This is only-
Mr. Marcus, 1207 and 1208 are attended.
Mr. Parker, you've tendered what, again, for the record?
1207, 1208, and this is new 246.
And none of them were objected and they're all admitted?
I'm waiting in terms of 1207 and 1208. We're waiting for Mr. Johnson to take a look.
So these, the 1207 and the 1208, these were reviewed by Dr. Hudson, and he had these at the time of his deposition?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I don't have an objection.
Admitted, whatever those numbers are.
So what's the last
1207,
number now?
1209.
So then the Quest record for Lisa King should be 1210.
They're 1209.
Oh, those are 1209. Okay, thank you.
And then last two are exhibits for Ginger Land Van Buren. This will be the new 330. I've already provided a copy to council. I believe there's no objection.
There is no objection.
And then same with The new Exhibit 375, these are select medical records for Cheryl Nally, were previously provided to council. I believe there's no objection to those.
How many pages, Council?
Here's it.
Is it the 7-page set? Yeah. No objection, yeah.
Shall be admitted.
So, Your Honor, just, are you
So
finished?
I'm handing Tori the new 375 and the new 330.
Admitted.
So, Your Honor, for purposes of the record, Tori, I just gave Mr. Johnson a snapshot, so he took a picture of these exhibits that we intend to use, I intend to use with Dr. Hudson. So, just for Tori to know, and I'll move these into evidence, Your Honor. I think some of them maybe have been moved into evidence. Exhibit 1, 10, 15, 119, 288, 423, 430,
I'm sorry, you said 288, then what was the next number?
423,
423,
430,
430,
431,
okay.
647 is the article from Garcia Cortez. So I don't know if that's been, I'm not sure if that's been admitted yet. So I'll wait for defense to address that. The next one will be 154.
154?
Yes, 154, which we actually introduced yesterday. 217, 246, 273, 293, 330, 345, 361, 375 was just admitted a few moments ago, 390, 1031, 1035, 1041, 1042,
Slow down.
1040, I'm sorry, 1042, 1046, 1207, 1208, and 1209, which Mr. Anglett gave a few moments ago. That should be it. And we moved it, with the exception of 647, I think Mr. Johnson needs to weigh in on that one. And let me make sure. And you know something? And 106. I'm sorry, 106. So 647 and 106, I think defense counsel needs to weigh in on, Your Honor.
Yes, I need to be easier to say what I don't agree to, Your Honor, I believe,
Okay, go ahead.
is it's the 431 and 647. I don't agree to.
You agree to those?
I do not.
Do not, okay.
I have to look at those, but if they haven't been admitted yet, that means we haven't looked them over. 246, I don't know what that select subset is, so I can't agree to that. Same objection to 330, I don't know what the select subset is. My concern is, and I want to move the case along, is I think we had an issue with having reports of 3 pages, then the 3rd page not being there. I don't know if that's an issue here. I have to see what that is. And the same thing with 375, that's the subset.
These have all just been admitted.
The 1207, when it says additional medical records, I don't know if those have ever been produced. Same with 1208.
1207 and 1208 were just.
Those are the ones you just agreed to?
Okay, so those, I must have different, I must be looking at a wrong batch here. Okay, I apologize. I have seen those, so I have no objections to those. So in summary, objections to 431, 647, 246, 330, 375, and the rest I do not have an objection to.
375, you just agreed to that one. That's Nellie.
They were just admitted.
They were just admitted.
375?
Yes.
I don't know why I'm losing my mind here.
And 330.
And 330.
I think those new sets were provided to the people crossing those witnesses and not to you.
Oh, I
That's-
understand.
Yeah.
Well, if they've been admitted already, Your Honor, I guess we're going to admit them again.
Okay, you just agreed to them a little while ago. So you're withdrawing your objection to 375 and 330. And
All right, then I guess it's admitted.
And 246 was also just admitted.
All right, then I guess that's coming in too.
I guess from what I gather, the issue you have are 431 and 647, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
so 431, Your Honor, is the slides of Taquante Henry, a person who suffered, actually had to endure a liver transplant as a result of consuming real water. Dr. Hudson, as a part of his investigation in this case, of course, reviewed the medical records, including the slides of Mr. Henry, and uses that information as a foundation for his opinions as to the damage done by hydrazine to the human liver. And as the court knows from Krause and several other cases, that similar incidents, both prior and subsequent, can be used as a part of notice and damages in a products defect case.
And what exhibit is this again, Mr. Parker, by
That's,
number?
Your Honor, that's 431.
Okay.
And then 647 is an article that was discussed by Dr. Hudson regarding relapse of patients suffering from autoimmune hepatitis. And so that certainly is an issue in this case. We have two plaintiffs in this case suffering from autoimmune hepatitis, Ms. Bordenave and Ms. King, as well as Ms. Cavey, who's not in this case, but he's also reviewed her medical records. So as a board-certified gastroenterologist and hepatologist, having dealt with this for 35 years of practice, he certainly has the foundation, the experience, meets all the hallmark requirements to give such testimony.
My response to that, Your Honor, is that Dr. Hudson provided an exhibit of the materials that he reviewed as it relates to all of his cases, but in particular, anything dealing with Ms. Bordenave or all the plaintiffs other than Ms. King. And if counsel can point out on his Exhibit 2, this images of a biopsy slide from T. Henry and this Garcia-Cortez article, doesn't give him much, on that exhibit, then I wouldn't have an objection to it. It wasn't readily apparent to me. His Exhibit 2 is page 62 of his report, if it helps.
Yeah, we're right there. And right now, we're limiting the discussion to proposed exhibits 431 and 647?
I believe so, Your Honor. I don't
Yes,
know
sir.
if Mr. Johnson took a look at 106 to make sure he's fine with that one as well.
No, that's one of the negatives of not being in here during that, that aspect, Your Honor. Those have been admitted.
They've been
I'm not
admitted.
going to object to it. So to answer your question, yes, it's these two. And my position is that Dr. Hudson's deposition was taken in this case. It was only taken 60 days ago. He's provided no updates to that report that I know of. He provided a list of the exhibits that he relied upon. And if these two exhibits are on that list and he relied upon it, then I withdraw my objection. But if this is something that's presented to him for the first time, that he's had plenty of time and opportunity to review, then it would be a surprise to me. And to question him on that would be unfair to my client. And that's the basis of my objection. Thank you.
Your Honor, I was at the deposition of Dr. Hudson. In fact, I defended that deposition on January, I think, 25th of this year. And during that deposition, I asked Dr. Hudson a couple of questions that should resolve this matter. I asked Dr. Hudson, and I'll set the table by starting at the top of page 91, just in case Mr. Johnson and his group may have a copy of this. I think Mr. Johnson may have hit on this a little bit, Doctor. It's my understanding that you've been involved in 4 trials. Yes, sir. And you've prepared reports in all 4 trials. I have. All 4 groups of plaintiffs involved in those trials. Yes, sir. And it's clear that Mr. Johnson is aware that you've been in trials. I don't know if he's reviewed all the reports. Based upon those reports and the patients or plaintiffs involved, were there patients that had biopsies that showed permanent scarring as a result of their consumption of real water? Your Honor, I don't know how Mr. Johnson can feign surprise when I brought to his attention during Dr. Hudson's deposition that his opinion is based upon all 4 trials and all the plaintiffs he's reviewed the medical records, including Mr. Taquante, who was the last trial in October of 2024. There can be no argument that there was no surprise, or there should be no surprise, because it's in his deposition. And Your Honor, Mr. Pepperman just pointed out they waived any objections to it as well, Your Honor.
Your Honor previously granted that motion.
Which exhibit are we talking about for this one?
This was, Your Honor, this was 431. So I don't believe that there can be any surprise given that testimony. Additionally, well, I'll let you rule on that one, Your Honor, while I pull some information on Exhibit 647.
And we're talking about Mr. Henry, is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Right.
So, again, our response to that is, the answer is no, it wasn't listed in his exhibits as what he relied upon to form opinions in this particular case. That's clear now, as I thought. The fact that Mr. Parker mentioned what this gentleman reviewed in other cases and other matters doesn't really clue me into what that would have been, obviously. They don't even mention this particular Henry's name in the deposition. So I can, or this particular slide that he reviewed that they're trying to get in now. So again, Hudson at some point in time has to be limited to his report and what he reviewed to prepare his report. He clearly had this slide before the report was issued. According to, I'll take Mr. Parker's representation to that effect, and therefore my objection stands. And I'm assuming the same thing will stand because Mr. Parker's not looking at Mr. Hudson or Dr. Hudson's exhibit of what he reviewed to prepare his opinions as it relates to this article that they want to introduce. So my objection stands, Your Honor, and you don't need to hear someone repeat themselves over and over again. You know what it is. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Your Honor.
That's good, Mr. Parker.
Yes, Your Honor. In terms, again, of exhibit number 431, unfortunately, Mr. Johnson is mistaken. In fact, Dr. Hudson mentions Taquante Henry's name in the deposition. He mentions it at page 72. He says it was Taquante Henry and the others, and I'm blanking on the right name now. He mentions Taquante Henry by name. Your Honor, this is clearly a part of what he has done as a part of his investigation, his resulting conclusions, and there can be no surprise given that Mr. Johnson and his team have reviewed the transcripts from the previous trials, and in fact, several of their motions in limine were based upon what we said during the previous trials. I think they took, pleasure in pointing out things that were said during openings and closings and during voir dire that made it clear to me and everyone else in the room that they had scoured over the transcripts of the previous trial. And so, Your Honor, they knew about Taquante Henry. They knew about it based upon the January 25th deposition. Your Honor's already... January 10th, I'm sorry, 2025 deposition, Your Honor. And so there is no surprise. The witness mentioned to Quante Henry, the witness confirmed at the end of the deposition that his opinions were based upon all of the patients he's researched and reviewed their medical records, including, of course, biopsy slides. So that, I think that addresses Mr. Johnson's concern on that issue, Your Honor.
All right. This is what I think is really important to point out as far as these specific issues are concerned. Number one, this case is not being tried in a vacuum. It's not. This is my third trial that I've had in this matter, and there's been two others. Is that correct? Is this the fifth trial?
This is number 5, Your Honor.
Number 5, right? And just as important too, we can't overlook the simple fact that whether it was trial 1, 2, 3, or 4, and I guess it's the 5th, all the issues we're dealing with right now arise out of the same transaction and/or occurrence. It's the sale of real water. And there's no surprises here. There really and truly isn't, as far as this matter is concerned. And Mr. Henry, his case comes to no surprise. I made my decision as it relates to prior substantially similar events, right? And I conducted, a 6-prong analysis? Is that correct, Mr. Parker?
You did, Your Honor.
All right. And so I'm going to let it in. Just as important, too, if I look at it through this lens, and at the end of the day, this is often overlooked, but these rules aren't self-executing. They're not. Typically, what do? You look at Rule 33B1, and whether there's substantial justification and or harmless. Mr. Henry's been known about throughout this entire 5-case litigation. It should come no surprise to real water. In fact, his case was actually litigated, is that correct, into a verdict?
Yes, that was the last trial.
Last trial, right? And how much was he assessed as far as damages are concerned?
He was given $75 million, Your Honor.
Right. There's no surprise, right? There isn't. And he's one of the plaintiffs in this case, so I'm going to let it in. But I felt it's really important to point that out. Real water institutionally is known about it. There's no surprise here at all.
In fact, Mr. Freeman was defense counsel in that case, Your Honor, and every other trial.
Right, and he was mentioned and so on and so on. And anyway, that's my decision. So as it relates to, I think, 431 and 647, is that correct?
That is correct.
Those shall be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, and I apologize just for, I'm clear on the record.
Yeah.
Your order on, find it here, 647 is based upon the same rationale as you did for the slide of T. Henry.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
All the exhibits proposed by Mr. Parker that have not previously been admitted are now admitted today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now what?
Your Honor, it's been a long morning.
We still have a trial?
Well, I've been on the bench since 9 o'clock straight, so. And I don't know how many matters I've heard today, but go ahead.
Well, Your Honor, we'll do whatever the court believes is best.
Well, I like to, if I can, I mean, I don't know what we have from a testimony perspective, but I'd like to maybe, if we can, hear some testimony from now until 12:30 and then break.
That sounds great, Your Honor. I'm more than happy to put Dr. Hudson on and get started.
Right? Because I don't want the jury, I think it's better for the jury to hear something before we break.
That's true, Your Honor.
Yeah. Because if we don't start now, we can look at it this way, they'll think, why did we come this morning?
That's right.
Right? I mean, they will. So, let's go ahead and get ready for Dr. Hudson. Bring the jury in.
Mr. Parker, in the interim, what am I titling documents 1207 and 1208 for my exhibit list?
So, may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'll show you what I have.
Oh, perfect.
Do you want me to take a picture of it? Or?
I'm just step down for.
Oh, of course.
You got the record. I'm step down just for 1 second.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Oh, you're welcome. This is the right thing to do. What's that? This is the right thing to do. We'll go through all of this, non-controversial stuff. Get to a point where they do so I get these little about this. I don't know how to use a plain interpreter will be able to.
Please be seated. Thank you.
All right. Department 16, now come back to order.
Please be seated.
All right, do the parties stipulate to the presence of the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defendants do as well.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. All right. And this is how we're going to proceed, just so you know. And I've been on the bench since 9 o'clock. We apologize for the delay. This morning, I think I had probably about 14 matters I had to deal with, and we got finished with that actually somewhat timely. And then we had issues we had to deal with regarding exhibits, and so that's what's taken some time. And I just want to let you know that if, for example, if you're sitting in the deliberation room, please understand this, we're working. That's basically what's going on. And remember, it was the combat vet, and one of the things he talked about in his letter to me was he was used to hurrying up and waiting. And that's just part of the process. Sometimes we can start right away, sometimes we can't. You know, and remember, this case has been going since when, counsel?
21, Your Honor.
21. You know, it's 2025 right now. And so I just wanted to let you know what was going on, you know. And counsel was in here working very hard with me. And so, but we're ready to go. And so what we're going to do is we're going to call another witness, and we're going to take live testimony. Is that correct, Mr. Parkin?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Until 12:30, and then we'll break for lunch. How's that? Okay, just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay. Mr. Parker.
You got to proceed, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
We call to the stand Dr. Hudson, Your Honor. I can, want you to get him on? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
And we do appreciate your patience.
Yeah,
Just want to let you know that.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
May I have you state and spell your name for the record?
William R. Hudson, Hutson.
Thank you.
Oh, of course. Good morning, Dr. Hudson. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Parker.
How's everything?
Good.
Good. Dr. Hudson, I want to start your morning off, and we'll probably lead into early afternoon, 12:30, about introducing you to this jury, telling them what you're all about in terms of being a physician, and then we'll discuss the liver, and probably by that time it'll be 12:30, and then we'll get into the heart of the matter after lunch when everybody's really tired and sleepy, and that's what we'll do, okay? Sounds good?
Sounds good.
All right. So let's start out, you know, Shane, put slide number 1 on. All right. So Dr. Hudson, can you tell us, first let's start with your undergrad degree, then your medical degree, and then we'll get to these board certifications.
Okay, so I went to medical school at West Virginia University and then did a residency at Charleston Area Medical Center, which was part of West Virginia University. And then went on to did fellowship in GI, gastroenterology, and liver disease at University of Pittsburgh.
Did you get an undergrad degree in chemistry?
I did.
No. Why chemistry?
I thought it was so cool how to put chemicals together and formulas and how things relate to each other in that kind of environment.
And in terms of certifications, could you describe or educate the jury on how you get these board certifications?
Well, after you serve a residency in internal medicine, then you become eligible for board certification in that specialty. So internal medicine is a specialty by itself. So then you take a test, a 2-day test for that, and if you pass it, then you're board certified for 10 years. You have to get re-board certified every 10 years. So it's not a lifetime thing. So you get internal medicine. Then I went on to fellowship in gastroenterology and hepatology, 3 more years of that. After that, you become eligible for board certification, which means you're deemed an expert. You have to pass a 2-day exam again, and then you're boarded for, again, 10 years. And then I continued on in my career doing mainly hepatology and liver transplant. So they established a board for that. So then you take that, so actually a 1-day test all day long, and then you become, if you pass those boards, you become board certified again for 10 years. And then you have to start all over again. So it seems like I'm taking tests all the time because I keep having to take boards I stagger them every 3 years.
All right. So it's fair to say that you're board certified in hepatology, gastroenterology, and internal medicine.
That's correct.
It's my understanding that you've been licensed to practice medicine in more than one state.
I have.
Can you tell us the states?
West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Utah, Maryland, and actually Nevada. I practiced in Nevada for a short period of time a number of years ago.
So it's my understanding also that you're currently practicing in Utah.
I am. Back in Utah again.
And are you familiar with the Children's Primary Hospital in Salt Lake City?
I am. I've worked in that institution previously.
And are you familiar with the hepatology department of that hospital?
I am.
How are you familiar with that hepatology department?
Well, when I was there before this time, we had a program, it was joint. So our pediatric liver transplant program and the adult liver transplant program were one. Same surgeons, same hepatologists, although they had pediatric hepatologists, but I was part of that program as well, even though I'm not technically a pediatric hepatologist. So we really functioned as one program previously.
All right. And did you ever have an interest or desire to open a liver transplant facility here in Nevada?
I did.
And did you attempt to have one established here?
I did at University Medical Center.
And how long ago was that?
That was 2010.
Okay.
2010.
Got it. So, in addition to your board certifications and your many licenses, state licenses, do you have any certifications in any other physician-related organizations?
Yes, I'm a member of the AGA, which is the American Gastroenterological Association, the AASLD, which is the American Association for the Study of Liver Disease, which is a U.S., those two are mainly U.S. things, but they have a lot of international people that join it. And then the last one is EASL, EASL, which is the European Association for the Study of Liver. And that's mainly a European organization, but there's a number of us from the states that have joined that organization.
In addition to those, have you received any academic appointments? Have you been a professor anywhere? You taught?
I have. I've been you sort of go up the line. You start out as an assistant professor, then associate professor, then full professor. So I've sort of done the whole gamut in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, University of Pittsburgh, University of Maryland, University of Utah.
How many years have you taught?
35.
So in addition to practicing clinically, you've taught for over 35 years?
I have.
Do you find both to be equally rewarding?
Oh, it's great. It's great to try to educate this younger generation. I've produced a lot of fellows. Fellows are what they're called when you go into subspecialty training. And so, I'll be out and about and run into previous fellows all the time. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about your familiarity with the primary children's hospital in Salt Lake City. Are you also familiar with any of the physicians at the Keck Hospital at USC?
I am.
And how did you develop these relationships?
Well, one surgeon at Keck Hospital I worked with at University of Pittsburgh on the liver transplant program a number of years ago. And then actually one of the physicians that was involved in this case, Dr. Hahn, was one of my colleagues at University of Maryland.
So you knew doctors both at Keck as well as at the primary children's hospital?
That's correct.
Did you by chance know any of the doctors that treated the 5 children that went to Salt Lake in December of 2020?
I did. I do. Yes.
Are you currently working in, around, or in conjunction with the primary children's hospital in Salt Lake?
Well, I'm working around primary children's now. The program the adult program and the children's program is sort of separated now. So I don't have much presence at primary children's other than, sometimes they call me and ask my opinion about an admission or something like that, particularly when the admission's a teenager. The little kids, they usually don't need my help so much, but when you have a teenagers, 14, 15, 16, they're really looking more like adults and behave more like adults, so they'll call about that.
Got it. Looking at your CV, it says that you were a professor of medicine at the University of Utah School of Medicine from 2005 to 2012.
That's right.
And while you're acting as a professor, you also have a clinical practice going on?
I do.
So are you treating patients with liver issues daily?
Daily, yes. I had a very busy clinical practice, taught on a daily basis, and also did research.
Have you treated patients like these plaintiffs here for acute liver failure?
I certainly have, many.
How many years have you done that?
Well, actually, pretty much since I started, so 35 years.
And you are also a professor of medicine at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, correct?
That's correct.
And that's from 2012 to 2018.
Yes, sir.
So when you moved to Maryland, were you also, again, continuing with the clinical practice?
Yes, I was head of the liver transplant program there and had a very busy clinical practice.
So explain to me what you mean by head of the liver transplant. Are you the surgeon? Are you advising the surgeon? Are you advising the patient? What's your role in that process?
I'm the medical part of the liver transplant program. So you have the surgical part and the medical part. The surgeons do the work inside the OR, take the old liver out, put the new liver in, and deal with that. And then as a hepatologist and the head of the liver transplant program, not only am I in charge of that whole program and growing it, managing it, making sure things are done right, I take care of the patients before transplant when they get sick, and then after transplant, we manage all those patients.
So are you the physician that explains to the patient, these are your AST, ALT scores, this is your INR score, these are your options?
That's correct. We go over all that.
Do you also handle the patient after transplant and tell them what immunosuppressant drugs they need to be on?
Yes, sir.
Have you also treated autoimmune hepatitis?
I have, many times.
And we'll get into that later on. I just want to get a kind of an umbrella of what you do day in and day out. Okay. So would treating patients with autoimmune hepatitis be something that you've regularly done over the last 30 years or so?
Yes, sir.
From 2018 until recently, you were a professor of medicine at West Virginia University School of Medicine. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What was your role there?
I was the head of the Department of Gastroenterology and Hepatology. So I kind of went one step up from being a chief, a head of the transplant and liver hepatology section to overseeing a whole department.
All right. So you'll be overseeing other hepatologists?
That's correct.
The same with other gastroenterologists?
Yes, sir.
And would you also have a clinical practice during the time you were the department head for that school of medicine?
I did.
Was that school of medicine aligned with a hospital?
It was.
How about the two prior locations, the University of Maryland and the University of Utah? Were they also aligned with a hospital?
All big university hospitals.
Okay. And would your clinical and practice include time at the hospitals?
It did. In fact, the bulk of my time was in the hospital.
Okay. While you were at West Virginia, it also indicates that you were a professor of surgery.
Correct.
What's that mean?
Well, it means that, as a hepatologist and as a liver transplant guy, I spent so much time dealing with surgical type issues that I also was a member of that department. So I worked with surgeons very closely, and because of that alliance and that relationship that we had, I was a member of that department as well.
As a part of your clinical practice, did you have an opportunity to review biopsy slides of livers?
Routinely.
35 years you've been doing it.
Yes, sir.
And is it customary for you to review pathology reports from pathologists?
It is.
Do you consider those pathology reports as a part of your determination on diagnosis and treatment?
Definitely.
And we'll get to this later, of course, in our discussions, but Dr. Hudson, as a part of reviewing pathology reports, do you at times look at the slides yourself?
Not at times. I routinely look at all my own slides. Any patient that I'm involved with, I go to the pathology department, sit down with the pathologist, and go over the slides.
All right. Thank you. Were you also a staff physician at the Salt Lake Veterans Administration Medical Center?
I was.
And I believe you did that for 4 years?
Yeah, well, I think it was more than 4, but 4 to 6 years, something like that, yeah.
And what drew you to the Veterans Administration Medical Center?
The administration.
Yeah?
It becomes part of your duties in some university hospitals that you are part of the staff of the VA. And I actually really enjoyed it. I think the veterans are great. They're a great group of people to work with, and it's they need a lot of help because of some of the things they've had. So it was a good time doing that.
Dr. Hudson, you're a very modest person, so I'm not going to go over all of these, but there's a section in your CV devoted to honors and awards.
Yes, sir.
Stemming back from 1978 all the way through 2022. Probably over 20 or so. Can you discuss with the jury some of those awards that you believe may be notable and perhaps relevant to what we're doing here today? And if you want, I can give you an example of one.
Mr. Parker, that stuff, I'm kind of like, I've worked hard and tried to be the best doctor that I can possibly be. So I've gotten some awards, best doctor awards and best gastroenterologist awards. And I got some awards at the University of Maryland, from the state of Maryland, for my work in liver transplant. It's, stuff that I'm proud of, but not a big deal.
Oh. So you're correct. You have several best doctor awards, top doctor awards, who's who in doctors. Are those awards typically awarded or provided to physicians who've excelled in their particular specialty?
That's correct.
Have you also given any lectures?
Oh, lots of lectures.
And how long have you been giving lectures?
30 years.
Have you written or contributed to any articles?
I have.
Have any of those articles been peer-reviewed?
Almost all of them have been peer-reviewed.
And it looks to me that you have several dozen of those.
I do.
And have all of them been related to your specialty in hepatology and/or gastroenterology?
Yes, sir.
Now, based upon your experience, Doctor, it appears that you've also received grants for research.
I have.
And what type of research have you done based on these grants?
I've done primarily clinical research, so I'm not a basic scientist. So clinical research is when you do studies involving patients themselves. And a lot of the studies I've done have been involving drugs or medications, particularly in the hepatitis C days when we were still trying to figure out how to treat hepatitis C. I was involved in a whole lot of those studies before we developed the drugs that we have nowadays. You know, in the old days, the older drugs were terrible, terrible side effects. Now we have a cure for hepatitis C.
And so these, be it the grants, the awards, the honors, they've all been based upon your work in the field of hepatology and gastroenterology?
Correct.
Okay. And has your research been devoted to finding ways of helping patients with liver issues?
It has been.
Let's start talking about the liver. Next slide, Shane. Your Honor, can Dr. Hudson step down?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I give you this. Thank you. So, what is that on the screen, Dr. Hudson?
The liver inside the body.
So, someone described the liver as being about the size of a football. Is it that large?
It's a little less than the size of a football, but it's a big organ.
And let's give another view of it. Next slide, Shane. So let's talk about the liver, and please point this out because I'm sure later on today this will become more important to the jury. Tell us about the liver, what we see there in terms of the hepatic ducts, the portal veins. Explain that to the jury, please.
So the liver is an interesting organ because it's the only organ in the body that has more than one blood supply. And that's the important thing to keep in mind. So, you know, this is a pretty good representation of the liver. And you can see the stomach is very close to the liver, and you have the pancreas that's right below here. This is a piece of the pancreas. But I think the important things probably in this diagram are to sort of show you all the blood in connection. So you've got the aorta, the red is the aorta, and then this little red thing here is the hepatic artery. So that supplies about a third of the liver, its blood supply. And that's probably not the most important blood supply because it's a third. But then you have the portal vein. Let's see, did they put in the portal vein here? Yeah, here's the portal vein right here. And the portal vein comes from the rest of the body. So the intestine has the mesenteric vein. Mesenteric vein comes all the way up through here, so it's collecting all the blood from our guts. And all that blood from the guts gets shunted into the portal vein, and then that goes into the liver. The liver does 250 different functions.
Shane.
But one of the functions of the liver is filtration. So that's why it takes all the blood from the gut and it goes through the liver. The liver has to do that or else we don't live. You know, it just doesn't work. So you've got that big blood supply. That's 2/3 of the blood supply to the liver. Portal vein is 2/3 of the blood supply. So if either one of those gets compromised, you're in big trouble. You're in big trouble. Here's the gallbladder. So the gallbladder produces bile, and it goes down here and goes into the gut, and that helps us digest all our food. So the liver is a really complex organ, and it does a lot of things.
Next slide, Shane.
So here we go, what I just said a second ago, detoxification, processing of proteins and biochemicals, and also taking care of things that are toxic. So if you ingest something, that's bad for you, the liver cleans it up and purifies it and then takes it out as waste. So you can't live without a liver for many reasons. A lot of it's the filtration process, but it produces blood, it produces enzymes and proteins that cause us to clot our blood. Toxins, chemicals would build up, as I mentioned. Big defense against infections. The liver has a huge infectious role in our body. And then if your liver fails, one of the things that can happen to you is your brain can start swelling then too, because ammonia builds up in the body and all that crap goes to the brain and makes it swell.
All right, so let's stop there for a second. Can you live without a liver?
No.
Can you live a short time without a liver?
We have a machine called Mars,
Okay.
which is an artificial device that can bridge you, and very few institutions have this. We actually had it at the University of Maryland. So you can live a few days on that Mars, but we don't routinely have dialysis like kidneys do, and you can live years on dialysis with kidneys. Mars is a few institutions in the United States have this. Other than that, you can't live without a liver. You're done.
So either it's a transplant in a couple of days or you don't make it.
That's correct.
Is that different than the heart? Can you live longer without your heart than you can your liver?
No.
What is the difference between how long someone can live without their heart using some mechanical device versus the Mars device you're talking about in terms of the liver?
Well, that's the difference. With the heart, we have a machine called an LVAD, L-V-A-D. And they used to be these great big huge machines that were as big as the chairs that you guys sit in, bigger than the chairs you guys sit in. Now, they have shrunk up so much, people can wear them on their back, in a backpack. So people can now be ambulatory when they have a failed heart that doesn't work, and it's hooked up into the system, usually through the vein in your leg, and or sometimes the chest, depending on what the surgeon wants to do. Put the backpack on, people can go about their business with an LVAD in nowadays. It's amazing technology.
So you can live longer on a mechanical heart device than you can on this Mars device for your liver.
Way longer. People can be on LVAD sometimes for years.
And so when it comes to the liver and liver injuries, is there any way of reversing damage, like, let's say, cirrhosis of the liver?
There's not. Liver transplant is your only way out once you develop cirrhosis, because cirrhosis is irreversible.
All right. Next slide. So we talked about this a little bit. Liver transplantation is the only option for acute liver that does not quickly improve. So talk to me about what quickly improve means in the context of acute liver failure.
Well, if you have acute liver failure, basically it goes one way or another. You're either going to continue to deteriorate, which in fact I just transplanted a patient 3 days ago. The University of Utah was there. Patient came in, acute liver failure. They didn't turn around for 2 or 3 days and they went down the tubes. Everything went wrong at that point. We transplanted them on Sunday. Or the patient can turn around. Now, fortunately, you know, in these cases that we're seeing in front of us today, most of those people turned around and got better. And when that happens, a lot of things can go wrong at the time before it turns around. Blood doesn't clot correctly. People can get too much ammonia in the brain. They get confused. They can swell up. The bellies can get large. There's so many things that can happen. And you really don't have a way to support that unless you're in an institution that has Mars that's only for a short period of time. So if that patient is going to improve, which fortunately most of the time they do because the liver is an amazing organ, or if they don't, transplant.
Be it improvement or not improvement, it appears that there's a very short window when decisions are being made for someone suffering from acute liver failure.
That's correct.
So we've learned, this jury has learned, that 5 children were sent to the primary children's hospital in December of 2020. Is it typical when someone's in acute liver failure that they have to be taken by ambulance or by flight for life to some form of medical center that actually handles liver transplants?
That's correct. You have to do it with urgency, particularly with these little kids. Now, little kids have an amazing ability to recover, but because they're little and their livers are immature and their livers are small, they can take a big hit and not make it. So, you know, these 5 kids we're talking about, they all got life flighted to primary children's because they were so sick it looked like they were going to do a liver transplant.
Now, are there liver transplants facilities in every state, every city?
No, sir.
Is that something unique to certain hospitals that they will have a transplant facility?
Correct. Only certain hospitals have liver transplant programs.
So in terms of people in Nevada, let's start with children. Will children always typically be sent to the primary children's hospital in Utah?
Well, I know that from Nevada, because you guys are sort of in a central location between a lot of liver transplant centers, Some get sent to California, some get sent to Utah. So it's split up a little bit, but it's going to be one of those 2 states generally.
Is it fair to say that Nevada does not have a liver transplant facility?
That's correct.
And that's what you were trying to start?
That's what I was trying to do. Because I think Nevada deserves one.
And in terms of acute liver failure, the jury has learned a lot about AST and ALTs and INRs, but you're going to give us more information on that.
Yes, sir.
Can you give us a preview of what INR means and how it's significant when it comes to determining or diagnosing acute liver failure?
INR is a test that we use to determine how well the blood clots. And it is probably, if I look at all the things that we look at on the liver, when the liver goes downhill, probably the thing that carries the most weight for me is that INR, because that tells you how well the liver actually works. The AST and ALT are indicators of inflammation or damage to the liver. That doesn't tell you the actual functioning of the liver. It tells you that there's a lot of damage if you're up in the thousands. But the INR will tell you whether that liver is functioning. And if that INR goes up and keeps going up, your liver's going to fail, and then you're going to have to need a liver transplant.
And what does INR stand for?
International Normalized Ratio.
Okay.
It's a weird name. I don't know where they came up with that.
How about ALT? What does that stand for?
That stands for alanine transaminase,
And then AST.
aspartate transaminase.
And I will challenge anyone to say that 3 times. Next slide, Shane. One more. So, doctor, you've indicated that acute liver failure is a critical medical condition. All right. Let's talk about, in your clinical practice, someone actually presents to you elevated liver function test, AST, ALT, and a high INR. I'm assuming if they have a high INR, they're in the hospital. Is that correct or incorrect?
That's correct. You've got to bring those people in.
Okay. So in terms of symptomology compared to those diagnostic tests, are you expecting a certain type of symptomology? Let's say vomiting, nausea, confusion. What are you expecting based upon those AST, ALT, and INR results?
These people generally do have nausea, some vomiting, abdominal pain, fatigue. Some people that present with acute liver failure will already start developing some swelling of their legs or even swelling of their abdomen if the failure is really bad. So, these people are sick. It's obvious when you take one look at them, they're really sick.
And I ask that because can someone feign or pretend to be sick at this point?
Well, they might try, but I would figure that out real fast.
Okay.
You can't really fake this now.
Can you fake an AST or an ALT score?
No, sir.
Can you fake an INR score?
No, sir.
So by the time you see someone clinically and they have this presentation of elevated liver function test and a high INR, what's next in terms of practitioner like yourself? What's next on the list to do?
Well, first of all, you want to stabilize the patient. So if they're sick enough, you may have to put them in an intensive care unit. Because a lot of these patients come in with very, very low blood pressure. They're not perfusing their organs. Very commonly, the kidneys go down with the liver. So if you have a really serious liver injury, lots of times it'll take the kidney down with it. The kidney really depends on the liver for a lot of things. So then you've got a sick patient, you've got them on dialysis, you've got them on pressor support. Pressor support means you're supporting their blood pressure with medication through their veins. These are very common scenarios that you have to do with people that have acute liver failure. So you've got to act quickly on most of the time. You've got to really be on top of it.
So this is not an outpatient deal at this point?
No, sir.
You're keeping them in the hospital till you figure this out?
Yes, sir.
And are you keeping them in the hospital until you can get those liver function enzymes down?
Yes, sir.
So in terms of those types of tests, do you also perform any ultrasounds or UT or CT scans or anything like that to correlate the liver function test results and what's going on internally?
We do. Everybody gets an ultrasound. because you want to make sure there's no blockages in the portal vein or in the biliary tree. And CT scans typically, because we're looking for what the liver looks, what the morphology, sort of the architecture of what the liver looks like, and blood flow, and all those things can give very valuable information while you're trying to work this patient up and figure out what the hell happened, why do they have acute liver failure.
All right, and in terms of these plaintiffs here, you've reviewed all their medical records?
I have.
All right. Is it fair to say that several of them underwent CT scans and ultrasounds?
Yes, sir. All of them had one or the other, or sometimes both.
Did some of them have biopsies?
They did.
Did all of them that you are providing testimony on today also have ALT, AST tests,
They did.
as well as INR tests?
Yes, sir.
Now, Dr. Hudson, in addition to the 11 plaintiffs in this case that you've reviewed their medical records, have you reviewed the medical records of 35 other people who've consumed real water and became ill?
I have.
Did you see any similarity in these additional 35 people to those of the symptomology suffered by the 11 plaintiffs here?
Very simple.
Is it fair to say, Dr. Hudson, that the 11 that you've reviewed, the 35 that you've reviewed before, they all consume real water?
Yes, sir, they did.
Next slide, Shane. So one of the things we didn't talk about is the jaundice, and I want in terms of symptomology. Why do patients suffering from acute liver failure seem to get this jaundice? What causes that?
The liver cells become very inflamed, and they are not able to process the bile in our body, the bile that's made in the liver, because normally the bile is made in the liver by the cells next to the bile ducts, and is processed by the hepatocytes, the liver cells. When those liver cells are damaged, it can't excrete the bile, and it builds up in our body. So normally it puts it into the bile duct, gallbladder, will store it, and then it excretes it in the gut. But the liver can't do that when it's damaged, so people can get really yellow, bright yellow.
So let me ask you this. We have 11 plaintiffs here. We know 35 that you've already looked at their medical records. Did most of them or all of them suffer some form or level of jaundice?
Almost all of them did. I really can't even remember one that did not at least have some level of increased bilirubin.
Okay.
Which is jaundice. Increased bilirubin is jaundice.
All right. And so, in terms of jaundice, you're actually correlating jaundice to liver damage.
Yes, sir.
And so, is it fair to say that if you suffer jaundice, that you've suffered some level of liver damage?
Yes, sir.
Now, when someone comes in, they're suffering from these symptoms here, bullet point number 1. Do you have to do a biopsy?
No, sir, and we rarely need to do a biopsy. This is, I don't know, those of us who are in hepatology, we can recognize cirrhosis and jaundice and acute liver failure pretty easily without needing a liver biopsy. And most of the time, a liver biopsy is contraindicated anyway because these people are bleeding. And they won't clot blood. So trying to put a needle into somebody that has all these things wrong with them would be, well, it's crazy. I mean, you could kill the patient. So we don't do liver biopsies in these people.
Are there risks inherent with every biopsy?
There are.
Before we get to the second bullet point, Dr. Hudson, you mentioned a word that I don't believe the jury may have heard before, hepatocytes.
Yes, sir.
Please tell the jury what hepatocytes are.
Hepatocyte is the working cell of the liver. So that's the liver has millions of hepatocytes. And each one of those hepatocytes is surrounded by veins, arteries, and bile ducts. So the liver is extraordinarily well organized. if you had one in front of you, you would see it sort of looks like a rosette. Everything's arranged very, very well. So the hepatocytes is the working cell of the liver.
Can you tell damage to the working cells of the liver, the hepatocytes, by virtue of a biopsy?
You can.
And tell me, how could you tell if one hepatocyte has been damaged versus another in the liver?
Well, they look different under the microscope. We know what a normal hepatocyte looks like because of all the history of doing liver biopsies in decades. So a liver cell that's damaged is swollen. It looks broken up. It has central parts of it look abnormal. So it's pretty easy to see when that hepatocyte's damaged.
All right. Now, the second bullet point says 15% of patients with acute liver failure die.
That's right.
That's a large percentage.
It's a large percentage.
Why is that?
Usually it's because we cannot get a liver quickly enough for them to transplant them. We are short in this country about a third. We only have about, well, it's changed a little bit over the last few years because the way we're allocating organs, but we have about 2/3 of the amount of livers that we need to transplant. Everybody needs to transplant in a timely fashion. So even with acute liver failure, even though these people go to the top of the list when they come in, so we have a really good organized way of getting organs in this country, sometimes you can't get an organ quick enough because it has to be the right blood type, has to be a healthy organ. There may not be one available, and if somebody is really crashing and burning fast, you may not have time to get one.
So those needing livers because of acute liver failure, if for some reason they can't get to a tertiary medical center that actually performs liver transplants, that's one reason they would die.
Yes, sir.
The next reason would be, even if they got there, can they get a liver in time?
Correct.
Is there any requirement to match liver to liver? For example, any one of the jurors, could they be a match for?
Objection, Your Honor, that's improper.
Yeah, on our change, that's not a problem. Could I match with you? Or would they have to take tests to determine if you could use a part of my liver if you had acute liver failure?
There's not a lot of tests we have to do with the liver, so it's a little bit different than heart, lungs, and kidneys. Heart, lungs, and kidneys have to have HLA matching, okay? So that's a complex thing, looking at antigens and antibodies and all these things. That's one of the things I like about the liver is liver, for you to match me, same blood type, similar size.
All right.
That's all I need,
Size and blood type.
size and blood type.
But if I had to undergo a liver transplant, or if you did, are there certain medications that you would have to take for purposes of accepting my liver?
Yes, sir.
Could you explain those to the jury, please?
After a liver transplant, obviously you're putting somebody else's liver in there, so you've got rejection. Anybody's going to, if I needed a new liver and somebody put one in me from somebody else, my body is going to say, this is a foreign thing. We do not want it. So my body's going to kill that organ off. It's going to reject it. So we have to put people on what we call immunosuppressive drugs. Those are things that it clamps down on the immune system in a specific way. Your immune system is not shut down by these drugs, but the particular parts of the immune system we need to control that rejection. We have the right drugs for that. It's usually 2 drugs. 3 drugs initially right after transplant. Then we get it down to 2, and then we get it down to 1 over a period of about 6 months. But these drugs are amazing because without them, we would not be able to transplant anybody.
All right. So acute liver failure, based upon what you've told the jury thus far, Dr. Hudson, can be treated only in a few ways.
Correct.
Worst case scenario, liver transplant, if a liver is available.
Correct.
All right. Or some way of figuring out what's causing it and removing that cause.
That's correct.
But be it figuring it out or getting a liver transplant, you only have a couple of days to do it.
Correct.
And so first things first is getting you to a hospital that can actually do a liver transplant.
That's right.
And is that why the children were sent to Salt Lake?
That's right, because they were so ill at that time that the physicians here in Nevada did not think these kids would survive without a liver transplant. So whenever there's any doubt, don't sit on the patient, send them to a liver transplant center. Now, having said that, not every patient with acute liver failure needs to be sent to a liver transplant center. Okay, so you're going to look at that patient, you're going to see their presentation, you're going to see how severe their laboratory studies are, how bad their blood doesn't clot, whether they're awake, whether they're alert, and then you're going to see what happens in a day or two. Every patient that just walks into another hospital doesn't need to be immediately sent for a liver transplant, because the liver is such an amazing organ that once you take away whatever that insult is, the liver can start recuperating right away. So, for instance, a patient can get admitted on day number 1, really sick, and let's say something was going on that was causing that liver failure, and then the day later, they kind of stabilize a little bit. You know, they're not getting worse. Sometimes it's just a matter of looking at that patient, okay, they're not getting worse. We don't need to send it to the liver transplant center yet. Then day number 3 comes around, and their liver enzymes start going down, and their blood starts clotting correctly, and everything starts looking better. Those people don't need to be sent to a liver transplant center because they're getting better. So things can turn around very quickly with a sick liver, particularly if you have a healthy patient, you know, a patient that's already healthy.
So in terms of our plaintiffs here, the records that you've reviewed, do you recall Ms. Bourdonnais being taken by Flight for Life to Keck Hospital?
That's correct.
Was at that point when she was taken to Keck Hospital in Los Angeles, was she being considered or evaluated for potential liver transplant?
She was. She had become very, very sick, and she was not starting to turn around. She wasn't turning the corner. So the decision was made properly to send her to a liver transplant center.
All right. Next slide, Shane. So these are the ALT, AST scores, and I wanted the jury to have an understanding of what the normal range of these scores should be. So could you discuss with the jury, or could you tell the jury, Dr. Hudson, what ALT and AST scores are normal and where they should be when you, of course, find someone with some kind of liver issue?
So ALT and AST is down here, and this is sort of general because hospitals actually have different normal ranges for these AST and ALTs, but they don't vary a lot. So this is kind of a common thing. 12 to 78 and 15 to 27 would be what all of us in this room should basically have for normal liver AST and ALT.
And in terms of INR, what's the normal range for an INR?
1, upper limit of 1, 1.0.
In terms of our plaintiffs here, did they all, based upon your review of the medical records, have ALT and AST scores that exceeded the normal limits?
They did.
How about INR scores?
Almost every single one of them had an elevated INR, sometimes to a very severe degree.
And in terms of the 35 people that you looked at, in addition to the 11 plaintiffs here, based upon your review of those medical records, did they also have high ALT and AST scores?
They did, yes, sir.
Did they also have INR scores that exceeded the normal limits?
They did.
When you consider the medical records as a whole of these plaintiffs, Dr. Hudson, is it clear to you that hydrazine has caused their acute liver failures?
Yes, sir, it is clear.
Is it also clear to you that the consumption of hydrazine-laced real water has damaged their livers?
Yes, sir.
And you give that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical probability and or certainty?
I can.
Your Honor, I know it's a little bit before 12:30,
That's fine.
but right now I'm about to get into the outbreak, so I thought this would be a good time to stop.
Good times.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be right now. All right, and what we'll do, we're going to break the line, we'll come back at 1:30. You're admonished not to converse amongst yourselves with anyone else under any subject matter related to this trial. Or to read, watch, or listen to the report of the comment on the trial, and those connected with this case. By any reading of information, including medication, newspapers, television, radio, or social media. Last but not least, in that former expressing his opinion on any subject connected with Trump and the following policy of the tweet. And that is what we're on.
All rights reserved. Jury security, Mark, you can see it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. You're gonna need that. Smart.
Mr. President, yesterday we made